From the beginning of human history, there have been whispers of beings that walk between life and death. Creatures that drink not water, not wine, but the very essence of another being. Blood, life, vitality. We call them vampires. Today, when you hear the word vampire, you may think of the pale aristocrat in a castle, a Hollywood monster, or even a romantic anti-hero. But the true roots of the vampire myth run much deeper and much darker. They are not confined to one culture or one story. They are a universal fear, a mirror of something humanity has always known but struggled to face. In this exploration, we will journey across ancient folklore, religious fears, and modern psychology to understand what vampires truly are and why they remain so alive in our imagination. Let us begin in Eastern Europe, where the vampire myth first crystallized into something resembling what we know today. In the Slavic world, stories of revenants, the restless dead, were common. People believed that when someone died unnaturally, violently, or without proper ritual, their spirit could not rest. Instead, they would return to drain life from the living. The descriptions were rarely elegant or romantic. These were bloated corpses, often with dark or reddish skin, sometimes still wearing the burial shroud, wandering at night and feeding on the blood of their own families. The community's response was brutal. Graves were dug up, bodies staked through the heart, heads severed, mouths stuffed with stones. This was not myth in the abstract. These were real events. Archaeologists have uncovered graves showing clear evidence of anti-vampire rituals. Villagers genuinely believed that if they did not mutilate the corpse, their loved ones would rise and feed on them. But Europe was not alone. In ancient Greece, we hear of the Lamia, a female figure that fed upon the blood and flesh of the young. In Chinese folklore, there is the Jiangshi, a reanimated corpse that hops stiffly through the night, absorbing life force. In India, the Vetala was a spirit that inhabited corpses and could drain prana, the vital energy, from the living. In Africa, tales spread of the Asan-Bosum, creatures with iron teeth that lurked in trees, waiting to swoop down upon humans. In South America, stories of bat-like beings, both spiritual and physical, haunted villages long before Europeans arrived. Everywhere across the world, we find the same archetype, the dead feeding on the living. The vampire is not a European invention. It is something far older, almost as if the image of a life thief is hardwired into the human psyche. Why would such a universal myth exist? Part of the answer lies in history. For centuries, epidemics of plague swept across Europe. When villagers dug up corpses, the signs of decomposition were misunderstood. A body might appear bloated, as though it had been feeding. Dark blood might pool around the mouth. Nails and hair appeared to grow after death, giving corpses a deceptively alive appearance. And when graves were opened, gases escaping from decomposing bodies made eerie sounds. To the terrified and uneducated, this was proof that the dead were rising. Medicine had not yet given answers, so the vampire became the explanation. Another route is psychological. The vampire embodies our fear of death, but also our fear of life. Think of it, a creature that lives forever, but only by stealing from others. It is immortality twisted into parasitism. At the same time, the vampire is strangely alluring. It seduces. It entrances. It represents taboo desires, lust, hunger, the surrender of will. In societies where sexuality was repressed, the vampire was the forbidden fantasy. It is no coincidence that so many vampire tales carry undertones of seduction. To be bitten is to be consumed, but also to be chosen. It is a violation and a union at once.
Religion also shaped the myth. In Christian Europe, the vampire became a symbol of the unholy. It was associated with Satan, demons, and the rejection of God. The Eucharist, the drinking of the blood of Christ, was sacred. The vampire twisted this into its opposite, drinking blood not to save, but to enslave. And so the vampire became not just a monster, but a theological threat. Priests and inquisitors wrote of them. Churches ordered exorcisms and post-mortem rituals to protect the faithful. The vampire, then, was a shadow reflection of Christianity itself, eternal life, but corrupted. When we move into literature, we see the vampire transform yet again. In 1819, John Polidori's story, The Vampire, presented the vampire as an aristocrat, cold, alluring, and predatory. Later, Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1897 would cement this image. Count Dracula was not a bloated corpse, but a nobleman, cultured and intelligent, yet monstrous. Dracula was foreign, mysterious, a symbol of invasion, of the outsider who drains the vitality of the West. This literary evolution mirrored cultural anxieties about class, sexuality, and even geopolitics. Vampires were no longer just village corpses, they became metaphors for empire, disease, and forbidden desire. As time passed, the vampire entered film and television, mutating once more. From the grotesque Nosferatu in the 1920s, with his rat-like features, to the tragic romantic figures of Anne Rice's novels, to the glittering immortals of modern pop culture, vampires have continually adapted to reflect the age. In the Cold War era, they represented corruption and contagion. In the age of sexual liberation, they embodied desire and erotic freedom. In today's world, where people question mortality and seek identity in shadow and subculture, vampires appear as misunderstood outsiders, rebels against conformity. Each generation reshapes the vampire into what it fears and what it secretly longs for. But beyond culture and fiction, there is an esoteric layer to the vampire myth. Some traditions speak not just of physical blood drinkers, but of psychic vampires, those who drain energy, emotions, or willpower from others. You may know people who leave you feeling exhausted after an encounter, as if they have fed on your spirit. The idea of an energy vampire resonates deeply because it reflects real human experience. In occult teachings, vampirism represents imbalance, the refusal to generate one's own energy, choosing instead to take from others. This can happen physically, emotionally, or spiritually. In this sense, the vampire is not just a myth, but a metaphor for relationships, societies, even entire systems that exploit rather than create. And if we go deeper still, the vampire becomes an archetype of the shadow self, the part of us that is hungry, insatiable, willing to consume without giving back. We fear it because it reveals something uncomfortable, that within us lies the capacity for parasitism, for selfishness, for obsession. At the same time, the vampire also symbolizes the forbidden dream of immortality. Who among us has not wished to live forever? Who has not been tempted by the idea of eternal youth, eternal power? The vampire promises it, but at a cost. And that cost is what defines the myth. To live forever, you must feed forever. You must never be satisfied. The hunger is eternal.
This brings us to their modern meaning. Why, after centuries, are we still fascinated with vampires? Because they speak to something timeless in the human soul. They are about power and vulnerability. They are about desire and fear. They are about the line between life and death, sacred and profane, self and other. In today's spiritual context, the vampire is more than just a horror figure. It is a teacher of shadow work. To confront the vampire is to confront our own hunger, our own fear of mortality, our own temptation to take rather than give. It is an invitation to ask, where in my life am I draining rather than creating? Where am I surrendering my power to another, allowing myself to be fed upon? And where am I seduced by the promise of something eternal, forgetting that eternity without balance is a curse? In folklore, vampires could be defeated with sunlight, with holy water, with a stake to the heart. Symbolically, what does this mean? Sunlight is truth, the illumination of the shadow. Holy water is purity, alignment with higher purpose. The stake is the piercing of illusion, the confrontation of the core wound. These are not just tools for killing monsters, they are tools for transforming the self. The vampire myth has survived because it encodes wisdom. It warns us of the danger of unbalanced desire. It reveals the shadow of immortality. And it challenges us to recognize the parasitic forces in our lives and within ourselves. So the next time you hear the word vampire, think beyond the fangs in the cape. Think of the ancient villagers, terrified of the restless dead. Think of the priests, struggling to define holiness against corruption. Think of the writers and filmmakers using the vampire to reflect society's deepest anxieties. And most importantly, think of your own shadow, the hunger that will never be filled, the temptation of power without responsibility. The vampire is not just a monster in the dark. It is a mirror, showing us the truths we would rather not face. And in that mirror lies its true power. Vampires endure not because they are real, but because they reveal what is real in us.